when a reclusive handyman named Jonah stops for a soaked hitchhiker on a rural road. He never imagines she's the missing daughter of a billion-dollar dynasty. On a deserted highway just outside the sleepy town of Maple Glen, Jonah Wright's old red pickup splashed through puddles as a storm turned the skies into chaos. He had just closed the gate of his family's once thriving but now fading roadside inn, the Lantern's Rest. As he crested a hill, his headlights caught a young woman stumbling along the shoulder-drenched, arms hugging herself idly. She looked barely 23, pale and rain-soaked, with long auburn hair plastered to her cheeks. She wore a navy pea-cut, mud-smeared jeans and carried nothing but a tiny leather satchel. Her lips trembled, and her hazel eyes flicked up anxiously when he slowed down. "You need a ride?" Jonah asked through a cracked window, his voice low but gentle. The girl hesitated. "I am not dangerous," she said, "just trying to get anywhere warm." "Hop in." She climbed into the cab, her eyes darting to every corner as if expecting someone to follow. "I'm Jonah." "Call me Elle," she said quietly. "Just Elle." She looked like she had run far, and maybe from something money couldn't fix. As the truck rumbled up the gravel driveway to the Lantern's Rest, Elle gazed at the building through the foggy windshield. It was more a skeleton of an inn than a welcoming refuge. 2 stories of weathered cedar siding, chipped white paint, and a flickering neon sign that buzzed like it had a grudge. Jonah parked and led her inside, wiping his boots on the mat. The interior smelled faintly of lemon cleaner and old pine wood. Elle looked around, taking in the sparse lobby, faded floral curtains and dust-touched furniture. "Not exactly a palace," Jonah said with a shrug. "It's perfect," Elle whispered, smiling with relief. He handed her a room key. "No charge. Storm like this, I wouldn't leave a dog outside." She gave him a grateful look that lingered a second too long. "Thank you, Jonah. You don't know what this means." He raised a brow. "You'd be surprised what I know about needing shelter." Neither of them could guess the storm wasn't just outside, it was coming for both of them. That night, Elle, still soaked from the storm, took a long hot shower in room 3. She stood beneath the stream, her pale skin pink from the heat, auburn hair falling in heavy strands down her back. The worn motel towel smelled faintly of cedar and detergent. She wrapped herself in one and stared at her reflection in the slightly cracked mirror. She didn't see herself. She saw a girl running from a golden cage. Meanwhile, Jonah sat downstairs at the front desk, nursing a cup of black coffee. At 35, with a broad frame, scruffy dark beard, and skin weathered from years under the sun, he looked like a man carved from stone. Strong but quiet, his flannel shirt hung open over a faded tee and his jeans bore years of grease and wear. Still, his eyes were kind. Elle crept down the stairs in Jonah's spare hoodie and oversized sweatpants. She looked small in his clothes, her hazel eyes scanning the empty hallway. "I couldn't sleep." Jonah motioned to the second cup on the counter. "Figured you might come down." She sat across from him in the dim lobby, steam curling between them. "Why'd you stop for me?" she asked. He didn't hesitate. "Because I've been alone in the rain before too." The next morning, Elle appeared in the lobby early, her hair still damp from the shower, tied back in a simple ponytail. She wore the same hoodie and borrowed sweatpants. Her skin looked brighter, her cheeks a little more alive. Jonah found her sweeping the entryway. "You don't have to do that." "I want to," she said. "You helped me, let me help you." Jonah nodded, surprised. "Suit yourself, just watch out for splinters, floor's old." Over the next few days, Elle stayed. She cleaned windows, reorganized the dusty front desk, and even replanted the flower boxes with wildflowers she picked from the back lot. Each time she worked with quiet focus, her delicate hands surprisingly efficient. Jonah found himself watching her, not in a possessive way, but with curiosity. She had grace, like someone raised in marble halls, but softened by experience. Still, something about her posture, her flinches when phones rang, her tight smiles, they whispered that she wasn't just another traveler. "You've done more in a week than I have in a year," Jonah said one evening, as they painted the porch rails. Elle grinned, paint smudging her cheek. Maybe this place just needed a little love. So did she, so did he. A week later, at 2:14 a.m., the fire alarm screamed. Jonah jolted awake, heart thudding. The hallway outside was hazy. Smoke. He didn't stop to put on boots, just grabbed his flashlight and ran. Room 3, he kicked the door in. Elle was coughing, curled in the corner in the same navy peacoat she had worn the day he picked her up. Her hazel eyes widened with panic, and she looked small and terrified. "Come on," Jonah shouted, wrapping an arm around her. The old hallway blazed orange behind them as flames licked down the wallpaper. Jonah shielded her with his broad frame, skin stinging from the heat, his flannel shirt catching an ember before he batted it out. They crashed out through the back door and into the icy grass beyond the building. Elle collapsed, crying, and Jonah fell to his knees beside her, lungs burning. "Why were you still wearing that coat?" he wheezed. She didn't answer. But when he helped her up, something metallic fell from the coat's pocket. A sleek matte black bank card with the name Isabella A. Beaumont embossed in silver. He blinked at it. "Isabella?" he asked. Her face said everything. the truth had just caught up. The next morning, the air still smelled like smoke and scorched dreams. Half of the lantern's rest was gone, charred beams and blackened walls where rooms once stood. Jonah stood beside the wreckage wearing a soot-stained t-shirt and work jeans. His strong arms were scraped and his face was smudged with ash, but his eyes were sharp, focused, not on the damage but on the girl behind him. Elle sat on the back porch steps wrapped in a gray wool blanket, her auburn hair singed at the tips, cheeks still streaked with dried tears. The black titanium card with the name Isabella A. Beaumont sat between them like a wedge. "You lied," Jonah said, quiet but steady. She looked up, voice barely above a whisper. "I didn't lie, I just didn't say who I was." He squatted in front of her. His tired, soot-smudged face softened. "You're the missing Beaumont heiress. Billionaire's daughter. Headlines. Why are you here? I couldn't take it anymore," she said. "The pressure, the expectations. My father tried to choose my life for me, who I'd marry, where I'd live, what I'd become. So I ran." Jonah let the silence settle. "And you found my broken inn. I needed something real," she said, looking into his eyes. "And I found you." The next day, Jonah stood outside room 3. The door was slightly ajar. He knocked softly. "Elle?" he called out, still unable to think of her as Isabella. No answer. He pushed the door open. The room was clean, neatly made bed, folded towels, no signs of the woman who had swept into his life like a gust of summer wind and left it smoldering like the ashes outside. On the pillow he found a note in elegant handwriting. "Jonah, thank you for everything, for your kindness, your silence and your strength. I had to go, but you gave me hope. I'm leaving you something to rebuild. I hope one day you'll forgive me for not staying. Isabella." Beneath it lay a check, 7 figures. Jonah stared at it, jaw tight. The handwriting, delicate and precise, felt like a farewell and an apology rolled into one. He sat down on the bed, letting the silence sink in. The girl with paint on her cheek and mud on her shoes had vanished, and in her place stood a mystery he couldn't touch anymore. And yet, his heart still beat like she was down the hall. It took 2 weeks before Jonah touched the check. Wearing his usual flannel shirt and cargo jeans, hands covered in grease and sawdust, he stood at the edge of the motel's charred foundation. The ghost of Elle, no Isabella, lingering in every corner. He hired a local crew. They tore down what couldn't be saved and began building from the bones. Jonah sketched plans in the evenings, wider rooms, a kitchen garden, solar panels. But most of all, he kept one small corner of the new inn untouched, a side patio with wildflowers. Her flowers. At the hardware store, folks whispered, "You hear about the check? Some mystery woman left it, probably made up." Jonah didn't confirm or deny. He worked harder, often into the night, with a focus that masked his ache. Every light fixture he installed reminded him of her idea to use antique bulbs. Every fresh coat of paint echoed her laughter on the porch. She was gone, but she was everywhere. One night, staring up at the stars from the half-built deck, Jonah whispered to the night, "Where are you now, Elle?" But the stars said nothing. 3 months later, Jonah stood in the newly finished lobby of the rebuilt Lantern's Rest. He wore a crisp denim shirt, clean jeans, and boots still dusty from the front lot. He wiped sweat from his brow and admired the polished oak counters, new vintage lights, and fresh air that flowed through the place. And then the bell above the door chimed. He looked up. There she stood, Isabella, hair now trimmed just past her shoulders, neat and glowing auburn in the sunlight. She wore a white blouse tucked into tan linen pants, elegant and simple. But her hazel eyes held the same softness, the same sadness, the same fire. "Hey," she said. He didn't move. "Took you long enough." She gave a sheepish smile. "I needed to make sure I wasn't running anymore." Jonah walked around the desk slowly, face unreadable. "You left without a word." "I left a note. A note's not a goodbye." She reached into her satchel and pulled out a small tin of wildflower seeds. "I came back for good. If you'll let me stay, not as a guest, as your partner." He stared at the seeds, then at her. "Yeah," he said finally, "stay." The next morning, Isabella, wearing a pale yellow blouse and denim overalls smudged with garden dirt, was already on her knees in the soil by the back patio, planting wildflower seeds. Her delicate hands moved with certainty as her auburn hair spilled from under a wide-brimmed straw hat. She looked like she belonged to the earth and sky more than the headlines she'd once dominated. Jonah watched from the porch, his arms crossed, his flannel sleeves rolled to the elbows. "Didn't peg you for the digging type." She looked up, smiling, eyes full of mischief. "Money doesn't mean I can't work." Over the next weeks, Isabella proved her promise. She created flyers and a website for the inn, calling it Lantern's Rest, a refuge for the weary. She introduced local produce into the kitchen's new breakfast menu. She even coordinated with shelters in the area, offering discounted stays to people transitioning from hardship. Jonah, gruff, quiet, steady, handled the repairs, maintenance, and heavy lifting. But he let Isabella in, into the business, into the space, into his heart. At night they shared coffee on the porch steps, watching the lights flicker in the garden they'd built together. Neither of them said it aloud, but both knew they were building more than just an inn. Within a month, Lantern's Rest buzzed with life. The lobby, once dusty and abandoned, was now filled with laughter, the scent of cinnamon scones, and visitors from all walks of life. Veterans on the road, single moms between homes, quiet souls who needed just one night of kindness. Isabella, dressed in a soft sage sweater and white jeans, stood at the front desk each morning with a clipboard in one hand and a warm smile on her face. Her hazel eyes sparkled every time a guest thanked her. She didn't just manage the inn. She lived it. Jonah, still faithful to his flannel and work boots, repaired leaking sinks, changed light bulbs, and quietly offered rides to the bus station when no one else would. One evening they hosted their first community dinner on the patio. Isabella wore a navy wrap dress that caught the twilight breeze. Jonah had even combed his hair, wearing a clean shirt that somehow still smelled like sawdust and mint. Neighbors brought food, music played from an old speaker, and children danced barefoot in the grass. Isabella looked over at Jonah, her cheeks warm with wine and happiness. "Can you believe this place?" He nodded slowly. "You made it happen," she corrected him softly. "We did." Just when peace had become their new normal, the outside world came knocking. One morning a silver SUV pulled into the gravel driveway. A suited man stepped out, tall, stiff, with slick-back hair and a tablet under one arm. Isabella, dressed in a beige blouse and dark slacks, froze at the sight. "Ms. Beaumont," the man said smoothly, "your father would like a word." Jonah stepped forward, standing protectively beside her, arms crossed beneath his flannel. "She doesn't owe him anything." Isabella's voice didn't waver. "Tell him I'm not returning." The man raised an eyebrow. "The media knows where you are. They'll come. Are you sure this is how you want to be seen?" "Absolutely," she said. "I want to be seen as me." That evening, her name was back on headlines. Heiress found living in rural motel with local handyman. Isabella sat on the front steps, her expression heavy. Jonah brought her coffee, sat beside her, and stared at the sky. "Still want to be here?" he asked. She nodded slowly. "More than ever," and that was all he needed to hear. The sun dipped below the horizon in a splash of rose and gold as Jonah and Isabella stood beside the garden. She wore a soft cardigan over her dress, arms folded as she leaned on the wooden railing. Her auburn hair glowed in the twilight. He stood close, his shirt sleeves rolled up, fingers stained from working the soil. "I never imagined life could be this," she murmured. "Simple, safe." He looked at her, really looked at her, not as the runaway heiress, not as the girl from the storm, but as the woman who'd brought life back into his broken world. "You make this place feel like home," he said. She turned toward him, hazel eyes wide, searching his. "You've been that for me too," she whispered. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't planned. It was slow, gentle, as he leaned forward and pressed his lips to hers, her hands rising to his chest as if to steady a trembling heartbeat. When they parted, she didn't speak, just leaned into his shoulder and let the moment stretch on. The kiss wasn't just love, it was a promise. In the weeks that followed, the inn remained busy, but life settled into something like rhythm. Isabella, now fully involved in the day-to-day operations, wore simple dresses, soft knits and ponytails. Jonah, still faithful to his flannel, teased her about her clipboard obsession. But love wasn't without friction. One night, after a particularly long day of handling late check-ins and a leaky roof, Jonah snapped, "We're running a charity, not a business." Isabella, eyes wide and hurt, stepped back. "You said you believed in helping people." "I do, but I also need to keep the lights on." The silence was sharp. Later that night, Jonah knocked on her door. He stood there, hat in hand. "I don't know how to do this. I've been alone a long time." She smiled sadly. "So have I." He stepped forward. "Can we learn together?" She nodded. "Yes, as long as we don't give up." Their first fight didn't end them, it solidified them. Real love isn't perfect, it's patient. Jonah stood in the front garden of the newly christened Lantern's Rest Refuge, the wooden sign freshly painted with gold letters. He wore his usual dark blue flannel shirt, denim jeans worn at the knees, and brown boots still caked in dirt. The inn had become more than a motel. It was a living, breathing space of healing. Isabella, dressed in a soft forest green sweater, black jeans, and white sneakers, had just finished checking in a young couple with a baby. Her auburn hair was tied back and her hazel eyes sparkled with pride. Together, they had turned the modest, crumbling inn into a shelter for the lost. Veterans, domestic abuse survivors, single parents, and travelers seeking peace found something here they hadn't found elsewhere, a home. They added a kitchen garden, built a library room, opened a community hall. Guests left letters, drawings, and heartfelt thanks tacked to a corkboard in the lobby. Jonah walked through the halls at night and saw flickering candles in windows, soft guitar playing from one room, laughter from another. He had once thought fixing the inn would fix him. Instead, she had come in and helped him build something that never needed to be perfect, just real. One morning, a sleek black limousine pulled up to the gravel drive of Lantern's Rest. Jonah stood by the porch, hands resting on the railing as Isabella stepped beside him. She wore a soft ivory blouse tucked into light brown trousers, her posture calm but her fingers twitched nervously. Jonah, ever her anchor, reached over and took her hand. The back door of the limo opened. An older man stepped out, gray-haired, sharp-eyed, wearing an expensive suit that didn't belong anywhere near wildflowers and gravel roads. Robert Beaumont, her father. "I'm not here to drag you back," he said, eyeing Jonah with cool curiosity. "Then why are you here?" Isabella asked. "To see what you've built." His eyes moved over the inn, the people laughing inside, the warm garden stretching in every direction. "Your mother would have loved this place." Isabella's breath caught. Robert turned to Jonah. "You gave her a place to be herself. I never could." Then he handed his daughter a worn family photo. "I'm proud of you, Izzy. Even if it took losing you to see it." He didn't stay long. But as the limo disappeared, Isabella stood quietly with tears streaking her cheeks, finally free from the shadow of legacy. To celebrate their one-year anniversary of reopening, Lanterns Rest hosted a lantern festival. Guests filled the garden, holding delicate paper lanterns in shades of gold, pink, and orange. Isabella wore a flowing lavender dress, her hair braided loosely down one side, a crown of wildflowers atop her head. Jonah wore a white button-up rolled to the elbows, sleeves wrinkled, face smiling like spring after a long winter. Each lantern held a message, some for loved ones lost, others filled with wishes. Jonah simply read, "Thank you for finding me." As twilight deepened, the first lantern lifted, then another, and another. Soon the sky shimmered with dozens of glowing lights drifting into the dark, like stars released from the earth. Isabella stood beside Jonah, watching their shared dream rise above them. "I never thought I'd feel peace." He pulled her into his arms. "Peace wasn't something you find, it's something you make." They didn't kiss under the lanterns. They simply stood hand in hand, home in each other's presence. Months passed. Seasons turned. The inn became a haven across the state. Isabella and Jonah hosted workshops, writing circles, and free meals every Sunday. The garden bloomed year-round, ended by guests who stayed to help. Local students volunteered. Even tourists began booking just to experience the warmth. One young girl, no older than 10, had come with her mother after leaving a bad home. Isabella, dressed in jeans and a soft pink tee, knelt beside her in the garden. "Do you like it here?" Isabella asked. The girl nodded. "This place feels like magic." Isabella smiled, tears threatening. "That's because it is." Jonah watched from the porch, arms crossed, heart full. It wasn't just about saving the inn. It was about becoming the kind of people who could welcome others in. What started with a storm and a ride had become a ripple of kindness, spreading further than they ever imagined. On a warm summer morning, Jonah walked with Isabella down the gravel path behind the inn. He wore a navy shirt, khakis, and a nervous smile. She wore a white cotton sundress, her eyes curious. He stopped at a small patch of soil by the edge of the wildflower field. A handmade wooden sign stood there, "Beaumont Garden. For all who need to grow." Isabella gasped. "You gave me purpose," he said, his voice steady. "You brought life back here, to this place." "To me." She turned toward him, tears in her hazel eyes. "I don't need a ring right now," he said. "Just a promise that whatever comes next, we face it together." She stepped into his arms. "Yes," she whispered, "always." Years later, people would say Lanterns Rest changed lives, but only a few knew the full story. How a runaway heiress in a rainstorm met a quiet handyman with a scarred heart. How kindness bloomed from ashes. How love redefined identity. Isabella still answered phones at the desk in her cardigan and jeans. Jonah still changed light bulbs in his flannel and boots. And every night, they lit a lantern on the porch, one for whoever might still be searching for home. They never stopped helping others, because they knew firsthand what it meant to be lost, and more importantly, what it meant to be found. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to subscribe for more powerful tales of love, hope, and second chances. Your next favorite story is just one click away.